I'd like to welcome you all here this afternoon as we come to celebrate Guy Edwards' life. I've had a chance to talk a little bit with Jerry and with some of the rest of the family to get a little bit to know Guy's history of what a wonderful person he was. And we're here to celebrate that life. I know that he would want us to do that, to be able to celebrate the memories. My name is Pastor Bill Cluley. I'm an oxymoron, a retired Lutheran pastor who is now occasionally an associate pastor here at MLUC. You know, I don't know if all of you are Unitarians, but Unitarians are very ecologically oriented. And so I wanted to share with you that in regards to that, we have this caution tape over here because we discovered that there's a bat living in the organ chamber. And we will get that taken care of this week, but we're letting the bat have its own space. And I just thought this morning, I learned that myself at church, and I thought, that's very you. And I thought I'd explain the caution tape around the organ. It's not that we're afraid of using the organ normally, but we're letting the bat have its own space. We're gathering today also, the music that is being shared with you is a reflection of Guy's taste in music, which was very, very broad, and we planned the service so that you would get a taste of that experience of Guy's enjoyment of music. And so as we continue through the service, we're hoping that you'll find this to be a real time of remembrance. There'll be some formal speaking during the service. There'll be a lot of informal speaking after the service. And so there is a time when I'll be inviting people to come. And I would ask that you give some rather brief remembrances and not make it too lengthy. There will be time for other more lengthy conversations afterwards. But thank you on behalf of the Edwards family for all being here to both celebrate and support the family in this time of transition. And so let us continue. And I believe Kate is going to be the first to speak officially.
Well, good afternoon, and I'm thankful to be here in this church, which was a home while my family lived here in Devon. And I want to thank Reverend Cluley and the friends and family who join us in person and online. My dad was a sociable person who valued his connections with you, and there's nothing he liked better than to gather people for stories. So I'll be true to that today. I want to start with who my dad was. I can see it more clearly now that my own children are almost grown. As a parent, what my dad gave my sister Lynn and I was stability. That was something he didn't have in his childhood home or his neighborhood. But he understood that kids and families need it. All through his life, he worked incredibly hard to provide a sheltered environment where Lynn and I could grow up, and that was how he loved us. And he chose my mom, Jerry, because she shared that value and could also provide the warmth and acceptance that accompanied that stability. And that made me and Lynn what we are today. Now, my dad was not a mysterious person. What you saw was what you got. And a lot of his views on life came out in his stories. So I want to read a quote from a book, Beautiful Swimmers, by William Warner. It's about crab fishermen on the Chesapeake Bay, where Dad built a home that he loved. There remain certain mysteries, certain gaps in our knowledge. Perhaps it will ever be so, and this is why the Chesapeake watermen endow the crab with legendary intelligence, strength, and cussedness. On winter nights, the watermen like to tell crab yarns on each other, in which blue crabs, small as they are, assume the power of Paul Bunyan's Blue Ox Babe. So I'll share a couple stories about my dad now. First, my dad loved to build and make things and was fearless at tackling projects big or small. He was a lifelong subscriber to Southern Living magazine, and the Christmas cover always features a beautiful white cake that would take an ordinary home cook hours in a kitchen. Well, I am among the few people who have ever tasted this, because my dad would make and serve them proudly over the years. And they were delicious as well as beautiful. My dad also had a knack for stepping forward in a crisis, often before we realized we knew it. When I was 8, I discovered that my bedroom window opened onto our home's slanted roof, allowing me to climb out and explore. I knew not to mention this to my parents. One day, my sister Lynn found out, and she wanted to try. She might have been 5 or 6. Well, out we went to the peak of the roof. Lynn looked down and had justifiable second thoughts. She started to call out for our parents. My dad was in the middle of his weekend chores, but he heard Lynn. He got as tall as ladder, walked up the roof, and carried her down. And I knew I was in trouble because he did not say a word. And as a parent, I now know there was a moment when he was standing on the ground looking 2 stories up at his 5-year-old, scared and realizing that his situation was his to fix. And he went on to rescue us at different times as we grew up. Another story shows how my dad had more obstacles in his life than we did. Growing up, he wasn't much of a student, getting into trouble with his friend Dean, and working many jobs. On the basis of his SAT scores alone, he was accepted into Carnegie Mellon University. Well, he had never seen the city of Pittsburgh, and the taxi dropped him off at a university. But it didn't look like the college brochure, especially the Tower of Learning, which the University of Pittsburgh is famous for. Eventually, he got to the right campus, but he quickly realized that his DC high school hadn't prepared him well. A classmate had gone to an elite boarding school and had had math through differential calculus. Dad was struggling to catch up. His professor offered to tutor him if he was willing to put in extra time and work, and he did. And Dad went on to graduate in industrial management. He was always proud of his time at Carnegie, and later he added an MBA and a master's in electrical engineering. Now, my dad was always very clear-eyed about his challenges in life, and he knew his time was coming to an end, so he told us how he wanted to be remembered. In his words, "I had a great life. I had 2 great daughters, Kathleen and Lynn, and each of them had my wonderful grandchildren, Nick, Iris, and Edith. Life has been great. I've had great success in many areas, and I built our home on the Bohemia River." And that was where our family spent many happy hours. So in closing, if you want to remember my dad, the next time you stop at a farm stand, buy too much fruit, because it's only in season now. A half bushel should do it. Take it home and start making pies. Spend several hours in the kitchen, make a big, big mess, and listen to the country music station. You'll end up with about 5 or 6 pies. Invite over the people you care about, and at the end of the meal, serve the pie and start telling stories. As we next listen to some music that Dad loved and hear from other people in his life that were important to him, let's carry forward some of his determination, creativity, and desire to connect. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Thomas Edwards. I'm the son of Grant Edwards, who is the brother of Guy Edwards. And when I've been talking with my family recently about my Uncle Guy, a word that comes up time and time again is positive. Guy was someone you could always count on to try to see the best in every situation. And many of my fond memories of family reunions were the very loud and animated conversations of the three brothers. Guy, Bert, and Grant would have these reunions, sometimes about Dean and their stories. And they would talk about everything from science to economics to foreign policy. And the three of them clearly all loved each other very much. But Guy was the one with the zaniest stories, the loudest laughter, and the widest smile. And as someone who always tries to stay positive myself, Guy was really an inspiration. It's a bit hard to know your uncle very well because we were separated by a bit of distance. I was in Maryland, he was in Pennsylvania for most of my life. But he always was a gracious host when my family would come up from Maryland and go visit Philadelphia at Guy and Jerry's. Though I spent most of my time playing with my wonderful cousins, Kate and Lynn, we did have great memories of Guy taking us to visit all the sites around Philadelphia. And I especially have great memories of the Franklin Institute and walking through the giant heart and going to go visit the airliner that they had there and walking through that. I also had a great time on what I believe was called the space trolley. A zipline style device that Guy set up with a wire between trees in the backyard of their house. And clearly, Guy was very devoted to his daughters to make things like that happen. And later in life, Guy and Jerry hosted wonderful family reunions at the house in the Bohemia River on the eastern shore of Maryland. And I remember him showing off his hand-built wooden canoe, another one of his home projects that he loved. I was telling my mother's brother, Buddy Healy, recently about Guy's passing. And Buddy thought back 60 years and said, hey, I remember a time that Guy hosted my parents, Grant and Barbara Edwards, along with my Uncle Buddy at Guy and Jerry's house in New Jersey to go visit the 1964 World's Fair. And they stayed at their townhouse in New Jersey. And while staying there, Guy not only took them to the fair, but also took them out sailing on a sailboat. And Buddy told me he had nothing but fond memories of that day. And Guy was born in 1939, before the invention of electronic computers. But he went on to work in computer science and excel at it. And even in retirement, Guy found an opportunity to teach a community college class in the Java programming language to try to pass on his knowledge to a younger generation. And given the current situations happening to many immigrants around the country today, as I seem to have fallen into becoming the family historian, I'd like to call out some of Guy's immigrant ancestors. Kari Tvedt, Guy's maternal grandmother, who came to the U.S. from Norway in 1903, and I think many of us cousins remember her. Guy's maternal great-grandfather, Kristen Rasmussen, who came from Denmark in 1872, and then married Anna Christina Hansen, who came from Denmark in 1876. Guy's paternal grandmother, Elizabeth Forbes Dalgety, who came to the U.S. from Scotland in 1871. And Guy's paternal third great-grandparents, Patrick Fitzgerald from Ireland, Joel Martin and Lucinda Stierwalt from Alsace-Lorraine in France, who immigrated in the first decades of the 1800s. In 2011, I became the father of a twin boy and girl, Grant and Amelia. And since I was an only child, I didn't know anything about sibling rivalry. And when I would see my two twins fighting, it really disturbed me greatly. So at a Thanksgiving reunion just a few years ago, I took Guy aside and I said, Guy, did you and your brothers ever fight when you were young? And Guy sat back with one of those really big wide smiles and looked and said, oh yeah, we used to beat the crap out of one another, punctuating it with hitting his fist and laughing. And I realized in that moment that I was getting scared over nothing. All these three brothers grew up fine, achieving great success in their careers and their family lives, and clearly remained best friends. And Guy's positive outlook really took a burden of concern off of my back. And he helped me to see that in the end, everything is going to be okay. Thank you.
Well, first of all, come on. If you like Bo Diddley, I mean, you got to like the guy, right? I want to talk a little bit about how my relationship with Guy evolved through conversation to become good friends. As Jerry would say when she saw the two of us, these are two kumbas. You know, in the Italian culture, that means two buddies. Well, that's what we became. So I'm going to go back just the memory lane just for a few seconds. Don't be alarmed. I met Jerry and Guy in 1970. I was dating Jerry's sister, and I was invited to their home, and they came to Pittsburgh. And just like everyone in the room, when you meet Guy, you say, hell, he's a hell of a nice guy. He's exciting. He's a neat guy to be around. I thought a little bit about that. I said, you know, I don't know if we'd ever be friends. We were so different. But then over the next few years, as we got together for family reunions and visit each other's homes, we continued to interview each other. And through these interviews, and by the way, Guy and I talked about that a lot. That was a characteristic we both had. If we were having gas pumped by a gas attendant, or if a plumber came to fix something in our house, we interviewed him. And it was kind of a neat thing. But anyway, so after these interviews, we got to realize, hey, we might have a lot in common. So as we continued and we had these reunions, we'd begin to talk. First of all, we get through the background, you know, catch up, how's the family doing, how are the kids doing, and then we dug in. We had a great time. Our conversations would last hours, true. And we covered a variety of topics. Good heavens, we'd go from the political arena, then we would go to sports, then we would go to, of course, construction issues. You know, I'll just say, here's an interesting one. How do you set ceramic tile below grade? What type of an adhesive would you use? So these are the kind of things we talked about. Another interesting one, we go in the archives. Maybe we talking about football. And we'd go in the archives. Do you remember when Joe Namath and the New York Jets beat the Baltimore Ravens in the Super Bowl, and how that became how the modern NFL was formed. Yeah. So these were the kind of ongoing conversations we had. They were fun. We got to know each other, really got to know each other. Now, we'd have family members or friends that would come in for an inning or two. They just couldn't make it. They just didn't have the stamina. So they would go by the wayside, and we would continue until Jerry would maybe give us a timeout or what have you, and then we would continue. So why am I talking about this? Well, through conversation, we really got to know each other. Guy's first job, he was a paper boy in his community in Washington, D.C. He talked about some of the characters that were his customers. He talked about that nasty German shepherd that would haunt him, and he always had to keep an eye out for him. He talked about his siblings, his two brothers and his sisters, and how they grew up. He also talked about a couple of his buddies in high school, and one of them was a fellow Kumba. And they got themselves in a little tight situations once in a while, but they always survived. Then, when he was about 16, I don't know how many of you know this, he decided that he might want to become a boxer. So he had a couple of amateur bouts that he won in 3-inning amateur bouts. And then he was feeling pretty good about himself. And then he went in the ring again, and it was a ex-Marine. The lights went out for Guy. That was the end of his boxing career. These are the kind of stories I just love hear about. So we really got to know each other. A love of his life. He built a house in Bohemia. That was he just was so excited about that. He would take Duke, their dog, on the weekends and just camp out, hang some drywall, put some flooring down, take a walk in the woods. That was fun. He was excited about that. He loved it. He had a passion, and he was so proud of that house. Just a tidbit I remembered. I think Jerry and Kate and Lynn bought this. He had a one-person sailboat. Do you remember that? I think he bought a kit, or I think that was it. Anyway, he would show that to me, how proud he was. He built it. And then he would take it out on the inlet of the Bohemia and kind of sail around a little bit. That's Guy Edwards. So here we are, celebrating his life. Well, he led a pretty darn good life, didn't he? Huh? One thing, first of all, I'm blessed to call Guy Edwards my friend. I truly am. I just consider him a very dear friend. We had just a wonderful time together, just talking about life, about experiences. But what I really liked about Guy, he never had a bad day. I mean, every day was a great day. He just would fill it up, whether it was work, a chore, exploring something, learning something new. Every day was a good day. Good to be around people like that, isn't it? So, as we celebrate his life, one thing I know, Guy had a fulfilling life. He was at peace with his life. He was okay the way things turned out. Rest in peace, my friend. Thank you.
I'm going to take a real leap of faith and guess that Guy would have agreed with this statement, that he would rather be seen than viewed. Think about that. We're here to see him, see a man who both gave love and received it abundantly from many of you. And I think this is the time to remember the joy that he was in your lives. I'm going to invite people who may wish to come forward and say a few words. We have some people with microphones so that everyone here and the people that might be viewing can hear you. So if you would like to add a word of love and support, now's the time to do that. So just let us know your interest in doing so if you're ready to do that. Okay, Barbara's right there with a microphone for you.
April Westphal and Bob Ludwig, and we got to know Guy and Jerry 32 years ago when we moved into our house on the Bohemia River as well. And we became fast friends and have continued since then, even after they moved to Chestertown, which is only a 40-minute drive for us. And you could never have two better friends than Guy and Jerry, I must say. Their generosity, their fun-lovingness, their willingness to share whatever they found that gives them pleasure with those that are close to them. Getting to know a little bit their daughters. It's just been a wonderful experience. As a couples therapist, as a psychologist and couples therapist, I would also just want to say, one of the things that struck me in the very beginning and has continued to over the years is the degree of devotion that both Guy and Jerry had for each other. As Kate said, Guy did not grow up in the luckiest of families, but one thing that certainly became clear to me, knowing him over the years, I knew the respect he had for his mother, and it certainly came through. I think she raised him right. Being born in 1939, I think he was a man ahead of his time, and he married a woman with a formidable intelligence, of those of you who know Jerry has. And he certainly wanted his daughters to have that as well. So he was a man who knew how to respect women, to love women, devoted to them. And for those of us who knew Guy and Jerry the last several years of his life, which were challenging years, but as Mario said, he always bounced back from those. But the bouncing back had a lot to do with the woman that was so devoted to him, and making sure that the quality of life he had and the joy would continue to be there to the very end, So a model for me, and I think for most of us who knew them as a couple. Just one last thing, I remember there's another couple that we used to share monthly meals, and we would all pitch in. And in the end, Guy couldn't join us. He was not able to, he didn't have the same mobility, but he would be baking pies and make sure that we knew he was there with us, which was, obviously warmed all of our hearts and allowed him to be very present at those gatherings. Yeah.
I'd like to be remembered for my apple pie. I'm sure he would be lovely to hear that. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Yes, in the back.
Yes, I'm sitting here looking at this picture of Guy, and I just can't believe that we knew Guy and Jerry for almost 50 years. And we came to this area in 1976, and we're newcomers, and my wife Lori and Jerry ended up at some kind of welfing wagon event or something, and they were both bored out of their minds, so they decided to go off and have tea in some quiet place, I don't know where. Anyway, that started a long relationship. And I've heard Lynn refer, when you go to the produce stand, get a bushel. I've heard pies numerous times. One time in our home, I think it was a Thanksgiving dinner, and so Guy says, "So what can we bring?" Well, you got any desserts? Well, no, we hadn't really. Okay, I'll bring a pie. So I think there was another couple, ourselves and the Edwards family, and in comes Guy. Not a pie, not 2 pies, not 3 pies. I think there were 5 or 6. I was just asking Lori how many were there. We couldn't remember, but we knew. And we're not talking about those little tin plates you get at the farmer's market. We're talking about pies, like Costco-sized pies. And so at the end, we have all these pies left. And when everybody leaves, it's just Lori and I. Oh, Guy took care of that. He said, "Not a problem. I'll take care of it." So the next morning, I'm thinking, there probably should be some, the pie was so good, I'll have some with coffee. I said, "There's no pie anywhere." Lori said, "Guy you said, what are we going to do with these?" He took them all back. So he was a problem solver. And what I remember about Guy was, I think the word bombastic comes to my mind. He was so full of joy and life and always laughing about something. And I remember one time we were with him on a weekend, and it was when he was with the Federal Reserve, I think. And he was full of expletives about this and that. And I said, "What, Guy?" And he said, "You can't believe it. We've lost track of like $14 million. We don't know where it is." And was he wringing his hands? No. He thought it was really funny, and then get it sorted out Monday. And that was a Guy. I mean, just full of joy. Really great guy to know, and I hear it in everyone's description. So positive. Miss him.
Robert? Up front. Right here.
In case you don't recognize the familiarity, I'm Jerry's sister. Some stories live on in infamy, and in every family has those stories that every holiday or gathering, those stories come up. And Guy Edwards was very fortunate that the Reisker family allowed him in the family. One of his very early trips to our home, our mother had, after a long wait, gotten new carpeting all through the living room and the dining room. And Guy was there that day for dinner, so this was a big deal for him. So of course, in his good behavior and things he always did right, he jumped up to help with the serving, and one of the plates full of spaghetti went on the brand new carpet. He made it through that. And the second story that always goes on is, this is my sister, our sister Carol, the younger sister, and it was a snowy day, I don't recall, it was a pretty heavy snow, I think, and I don't remember why, but I do remember that Guy getting out there to help the little sister goes to push her in the sled down the hill, and she went over the hill and into the snowdrift. But she made it, and he made it. We got to know Guy, loved him. He was a wonderful part of our lives, and we're so glad that we checked that he made it into the Reisker, the Edwards families.
Well, I don't see anyone else that is prepared to talk at this point, so what we are gathered here to do is to move forward, as Guy would want that to be. And, oh, you have somebody in the back? Okay, well, I will shut up.
Hello. Vito Morley from Chestertown, and I've known Jerry and loved her for over 30 years in Chestertown. And we also loved Guy. However, these are words from my husband, Robert Fox, who is saying, let me tell you about the fit. And those are words of our friend, Mr. Guy Edwards. Let me tell you about the feds.
Okay, I'm going to ask again because I didn't look last time. Anybody else that would like to speak? Okay. Well, one of the important things about today is also to recognize that Jerry has made a move back to a place where she has many friends, but that means there's a little more distance from more recent friends. It's important for all of us that can do so to stay connected, supportive, and I think you know that you have a lot of love surrounding you, and that as you chart the next journey in the next days, months, and years ahead, that you have a supportive community of friends that reach out way beyond just neighborhood, and that that's part of the legacy of your relationship together with Guy, that he was the kind of person that helped friends become friends. And that's a great legacy for you and for, you know, kids and grandkids. And I had a little conversation with some of them about their tentative launching of themselves into this big wide world. If you do it even a little bit like your grandpa, you'll be just fine. Enjoy life like he did, and that will work wonders as you chart your way through. You know, most of us older people here don't know what to tell you is going to be sure. You know, technology is changing. I think about the fact that Guy got in early on the computer wave. Jerry and I were talking. I for a little while was a graphic artist in a print shop, learning the earliest version of printing technology moving into the computer world. Right at the same time, Guy was exploring that and then launched into a great career in that area. And I think about how much technology has changed in my lifetime, and in yours it changes every other week. But you will still be fine as you figure out where your place in all of that will be, if you just keep your grandpa in your mind, in your heart, and remember that he faced challenges too. We all do. But he would want you to do so with a confidence that comes from knowing you are loved and you are also part of his legacy. So live your life the way you think he would want you to, and you can't go wrong. All right, I'm going to stop talking now. Again, when we're finished here, we're the immediate family going to leave during the prelude, and then you can join us in the fellowship hall across and continue the conversations and maybe some of the stories you weren't sure you could say in church.